Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast. I am your host, Evan Shout. I got my co-host, Kristjan Hebert here. After a little bit of a hiatus, we are back. So I guess give me an update. We're mid-July, or I guess we're early July right now. What's going on at the farm?
Yeah, overview. So seeding was done, started earlier than last year and finished earlier, but looks like fungicides are going to be 2 to 4 days later than last year starting. Pretty typical considering we've had, 6 to 9 inches of rain across the farm last year. We were as low as 1 and, as high as 4. So knock on wood, crops look pretty good. Probably fungicide everything. Had to bring planes in some spots because it's almost too wet for the ground rigs. And you never want to talk about a crop too much in July. So I might leave it at that.
So, July 2nd, what's the plan for holidays? What do you do over the summer? I guess would be more a question for me.
Yeah. So, June's always busy with herbicides and just cleaning up after seeding. July, we tend to, all the trucks and trailers come through the shop. Combines actually are all ready. So we always have a goal for the team that everything for harvest is ready and pointed at the road for July 15th, because typically people want to take some holidays, the last week or two of July and the first week of August. And you never know around here. Usually it's pretty typical we're harvesting by August 15th to 20th. So that's kind of what July's for, is make sure that all the harvest equipment's pointed at the road, start hauling the last bit of grain, that's still in the bins here the next few weeks, and keep the sprayer crews running as hard as we need them to run. But a little bit of wait and see timing. Obviously, fungicide's a little more critical to pick the right day. You don't have necessarily as big a window. So, even today's a good spray day, but we probably can't start till Thursday, Friday by the looks of it.
Yeah. So I guess I want to go back a couple weeks. So obviously we've had a couple of eventful weeks. from the podcast standpoint as well as business. So I guess live podcast at Farm Progress. What'd you think? And I guess give me your highlights of, I guess, Justine Hendricks, which is the Farm Credit Canada CEO, and how she handled it on stage. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought Justine was awesome. She's a spark plug. I got a lot of respect for her. So it was, she handled it really well. You and I both know her team was hoping for a bunch more rigid questions, which isn't quite how we operate. But Justine's really good on her feet and can pivot pretty much to any type of a question. I always get the kickback. Obviously, I was fairly blunt at the start and told her she wasn't a typical agriculture banker, but maybe not typical to Western Canada, except I maybe didn't say non-typical. I maybe said, short little black lady that speaks French from Central Canada, kind of said what everybody was thinking. Which, to be honest, I don't mind saying, because that's what everybody was thinking, and I got lots of respect for her and probably do as much or more than anybody with her in agriculture. So, and she answered it perfectly, right? She came from EDC and had a belief in where agriculture could take the country, building relationships between Central Canada and Western Canada, and just a belief in agriculture, which was pretty cool, and as much from the global stage as the Canadian stage. So. But yeah, once again, she was fantastic, and I think in general, overall, it went pretty well. I don't know. You give me your 2 bits.
Well, I think for me, it was a couple. The first one, obviously, like you said, we were looking out in the crowd, looking at, call her handlers or whatever you want to call them, but the people on her team that were worried, and they should have known they didn't have to be, but at the same time, she rolled with the punches really well. So for me, somebody that can talk and somebody that can give and take, by the end, she was giving it back to us. So for me, that's not only fun, but it takes a lot of the stress out of it. The other side is, talking to her after and some of the text messages back and forth that you've had with her. And even her team got stuff out of that. So when you come across and you take over an entity like that and you start making large scale changes, which she's done, which we both, I think, agree we're happy with so far and what she's doing and she's following through on her word. But then her team started to actually understand who she was and gets a little bit closer to her, because I'm sure some of them have not had the conversations that we've had with her. So it kind of gave them a kind of an introduction almost to say, here's who she is. And she didn't hold back. And even on the Canada first versus Saskatchewan first stuff. I mean, she went right back at you, and that's what we want. We don't want someone that's going to just sit back and say yes, 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 and she gave us where they're headed, and I mean that to me was huge. They're not just going to continue to be an ag bank. They're essentially going to invest in VC. They're going to invest in education. So some of her key pillars, and I forget what she called it, but her key metrics, that's probably where I got excited a little bit, is that she's there to make change, and she's doing it. So.
Well, I think, our big thing when we started the podcast was to have real discussions with real people and maybe highlight, because of everything we do in the industry, maybe some unique stories and people that not everybody knows, right? So, I mean, with Justine, it was both for her team, but also for farmers to realize, like, she's just a pretty good person that's full of piss and vinegar and is kind of willing to stand up for agriculture as much as run a bank. She was willing to say that it's a multi-billion-dollar business that she's running, right?
$2 billion in venture capital, right?
They've probably invested more in venture cap than anybody in the country, and nobody even knows that about them, right? So I think, the fact that she was relatable for both her team members and for farmers, and I mean, the ag minister was in the crowd, so it's good for him to hear that, and a number of other people. But whether it's Dallas sharing, that opportunities are on the other side of fear, and it's okay to do things that maybe aren't normal in agriculture, right? Because I mean, to me, Dallas selling the farm is way more of a oddball in agriculture than Justine from Central Canada being the CEO of FCC, right? But I mean, I think that was our goal, is we want to have real conversations. We're not going to be canned into a question and answer. We won't have the guest on. And so the person needs to be relatable. We're going to have them on because we enjoy them. And that doesn't mean that they agree with us on everything. No different than, like you said, middle of the podcast, she flat out looked at me and said, are we going to go there? Because her and I have some differing opinions on how Team Canada can be successful, but we both have the same end goal. We want Canada agriculture to be successful. And so then that's a debate. It's not conflict. And so I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, and I made the joke at the beginning. I mean, we gave them a question list because that's what her handlers required. She knew we weren't going to ask those. I mean, she made the joke as soon as she walked up to us that day of there was no way those questions were coming out, because they were pretty much right off of, Chat GPT of what we should ask her. And neither of us wanted to. So no. And then I think the other one that hit for me is, I mean, we've had more impressions and more social media in the last, 2 weeks with not only hers, but then having Riley Richards on. I mean, he took the successes on the other side of fear, which came from the Dallas one, and he ran with it. And I mean, it's hit not just the main social media platforms, but it's also hitting a lot of the mental health awareness. And I thought he did a great job. And honestly, we're getting a lot of positive feedback, and it'll probably end up being our top podcast right now, I think.
Well, I think the key thing, once again, we like to have interesting people on the podcast, and that doesn't necessarily mean interesting when it comes to how they run their farm. It's just interesting as people. And I think Riley, the reason we get along so well with him is it's that, believing your future can be bigger and better than it is today, and investing in the things to get you there. Now, we spend a lot of time on investing in land or talking about machinery costs, but let's be honest, there's one thing that takes most operations to the next level, and it's the farm leader. And Riley invested a lot of time and effort into himself in the last number of years to be a better person for his farm, and how he's delegated, but how he's got over being an alcoholic. And then on top of it, I mean, then he throws light at it to say, like, Jesus, and then I'm sober and I break my goddamn leg in the middle of nowhere and have to get stars. But once again, nowhere in that story does he get negative. It's just, I believe the future is going to be better. So this is another obstacle that I have to overcome. And I think, whether it be Farmer Coach or our farm or Maverick, like, that's really what we're addicted to, is people with great positive mindsets that believe the future can be better than the past. And so instead of looking at everything as a problem, it's kind of like, I'll use Dallas's quote again, right? Opportunities on the other side of fear. But that fear is a problem, or something that general society thinks, or what agriculture thinks. No, like, just look for the opportunity instead of focusing on the problem. And it's amazing how you can get there. And I mean, Riley's stories are some of the best at explaining that.
Yeah. And I mean, it went in, and obviously he was in Farmer Coach last week, which we ran a couple, and we were talking succession last week, which was awesome, because again, it ties right into a lot of this of, what's the legacy of the farm. And obviously we go through the time, brains, and money scenarios that we've talked about in the past, but the big one for me is you're right. It was all positive of, the legacy for the next generation is whether we want to leave it better, whether we want to leave it for the kids, whether we just want to sell it. I mean, it didn't matter what they were talking about. It was still a positive discussion. And I find that's where the growth comes. I mean, I have those, I've dealt with those clients in the past where everything's negative and nothing's going to work. And, every other farm around me is being stupid and I've heard everything. So for me, the positivity ties right into the strategy and the growth. And you could see it with.
Yeah. I mean, I never know if I should go there, but obviously I'm friends with Manette Farms, and I can still remember one of the first times I met Daryl. I heard his first name and and I said, I didn't actually really realize that your name was Daryl. I always thought, Russ was the one brother I kind of knew, and I thought the other guy's name was fucking, because that's all I ever heard. No, it wasn't Daryl Manette. It was fucking Manette. And sorry, I shouldn't swear. But I mean, it's the way kind of our industry is, right? Not just our industry. I'll just say, and I've said this before, Tim Hortons is pretty successful because in general, Canadians try to find time to talk about who should fail next or who's maybe being too successful. And I think, I won't speak for you, but I mean, I just get so excited about other people's success. And I don't care if it's big success, i.e., you're buying a bunch of land or you just went public with your company, or if it's little success and that you took a U9 baseball team from kids that couldn't catch a ball, to the league final, and they're happier than heck and going out for a pizza party. You're focused on success and improvement and a better future, right? And that, I don't know, it's addicting to me. And I think I always say that we're addicted to the game, right? Because I think that's an attitude that really shines through in people that played team sports. It was a belief that it didn't matter where you started. If you put in hard work and you support each other and build each other up at the end of the season, you'd have a shot to win it all, right? And you had to believe that, or you had already failed. And so I think that's something we always try to drive through. And it's, it's the reason probably that you and Jeff and I all work together, is that you can still have person that, let's be honest, you like to call out the odd thing because the numbers might not say what my dream's saying. But it's not that you don't believe the dream, right? It's just, are we managing the risk side so that if the dream has a couple speed curves, we're not in trouble? And I think, that part just excites me, so that everyone we can be around with that type of a mindset. And I think that's one of the goals with Farmer Coach, right? Is to get those same type of people in the room, right? I think he probably wouldn't mention me saying it, but like a good friend Galbraith out of Manitoba, like young farmer, just super positive, wants to find ways to be around great people and great ideas and moving forward. And I know his mom really well too. And she's the same way, right? It just, it's infectious when you're positive.
Well, and I find the success part, I mean, you could either get motivated by it or driven by it, or you can let it drive you down. So, I mean, those are the two options. And too often we see the second option, and that's part of, like you said, why we started the coaching was we started seeing some of those producers that were asking questions. They wanted to know. And you know what? They were doing stuff that we wanted to know. So I just wrote a blog that's coming out, and it's more about what I've learned from the podcast and from Farmer Coach and stuff, just as much as what we've taught. Because for me, that's the benefit I get, is I get stories from all across, Western Canada, US, and they're helping us be better. And that's what motivates me. It's not ego. It's not naive. It's just, I like success because it actually drives me to try to be better.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I'm not naive. I got a brother with the same first name as Manette does, right? Depending on what group you're talking in. I mean, if you're moving forward, even necessarily if you're successful or not, if you're doing things different, there's going to be people that disagree with your opinion and how you're doing it, but you're not doing it for anybody else. Right? You're doing it for yourself and your team members and your family or whoever that drive is. Just no different, than a sports team is. And so, like you said, there's the story that the 5 people you surround yourself with is who you're most likely to be like. And I'd sure like to be around 5 people that are super positive and believe the future can be bigger, not only in their business, but in their area and in their country and everything. Right.
So I guess that's going to lead me into our next thing. And I did a little bit of pre-work on this one because you sent me an article out of, I think it was Twitter or Instagram, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. And we had the girls essentially write it down, take it down, because we were going to do something with it. And it kind of sat on the shelf. We didn't do anything, but I wanted to bring it up here because I think it fits kind of what we've been talking about with the guests we've had, as well as the coaching and stuff and it was called the 10 controversial truths about life. And it was from Alex Hormozi. If I destroy that name, I apologize, but it essentially had 10 things that literally tied back to, I guess, ultra successful people. Let's put it that way. So, and it's not based on ag, but I think a lot of it ties back into ag. So I want your opinion on them as I go through them, but then obviously a discussion on where you see that hit, and not only for you, but where you see it hits for the industry. So the first one is,
I think you'd even switch it to probably defines ultra driven people, depending, and it doesn't matter where they are at on their success journey, right?
No.
Yeah. Because I remember, I don't even remember what the 10 of them are. I just remember sending it to you saying we should write this down. And I specifically remember saying this guy's first 3 points might explain me better than I could explain myself.
Yeah. And honestly, the first three were the three common traits of ultra, let's call it driven, successful, whatever you want to use the terminology, people. And the first one's superiority complex, which I love, because don't get me wrong, but having ambitious dreams and the belief you were meant for great things. So, I mean, give me that side of it, where your head goes when I say that one.
Well, I think the general concept on that is that, to be honest, you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur, because you're not following the norms of society. So you kind of have to believe that your ideas and the people you surround yourself with or work with are going to get you farther in life than just following the typical path. And so in order to do that, you do have to have a bit of blind confidence, whether that's in yourself or in the company you work with, et cetera, that if you're going to do something different in this world or change this world, yeah, you gotta believe that you can be different. And that takes a certain ability if you still want to be able to sleep at night.
Well, for me, the ambitious dreams part, that's the interesting part. I mean, if you had to go and do a 9 to 5 and do the same thing every day, and there was no actual goal of something, beyond what you even thought you could do, it just, what's the point? So I mean, that's where it drives me.
Let's go back to our EOS. I mean, the first couple times, if I go to when Jeff first started, and then the first EOS we did with you, like both times we set goals that in theory we thought were pretty big, right? Yeah. And when we blew them out of the water, and we gave ourselves 10 years, and 3-4 years later, they were done. I mean, I think Jeff and I's goal was 16,000 acres when he started 7 years ago, right? And I can't remember the exact goal with the three of us, but it's to the point now where that's the fun part. Sending the 10-year goal where the three of us look at each other and say, like, I actually don't know if that's possible, but it sounds like it'll be fun, right? That is the interesting part.
Well, and the fun part was we said it, and then you talked to our team, and I mean, we went through an exercise last week where our team literally said that was too low, and they set higher goals than what we'd set. So I mean, that to me definitely hits home, is that they have bigger dreams than I do right now, or bigger belief, I guess, in what we're doing, which is, I mean, makes it easier for us.
Well, I think the big thing though too, right, is we've built the team to think the way we do and have characteristics and skills to do that. So by setting the goals and then letting them kind of take a second run at it, it forces us to be better, right? Our team's not holding the reins back. Like I think that's one of the keys on succession plans, right? There's succession plans where the reins are being held back on the new leader, and there's succession plans where it's like, show me where you can go. And it's the same with your team. And our team, to be honest, makes you and Jeff and I wake up in the morning and be like, I better be on my game this week, because there's only 52 weeks this year, and there's only 520 weeks till we hit that 10-year target. And I don't have a lot of time to be complacent. Not that I have to do all the work physically, not that I have to do everything, no different than you two, but we have to find the chess pieces and puzzle pieces to get there, because they believe we can get there.
Second one, crippling sense of insecurity. So fear that you'll never be enough if you stop.
Yeah. Like, so I mean, as you know, the way my personality tests all read, I don't really know what stress is. I can't feel it. I don't know. And I think fear follows that. But what a couple of my biggest motivators are a fear of failure. And that ties back to a conversation my grandpa had with my dad way back. And I won't go too far into it, but, more or less got told that we maybe couldn't quite do it. So a fear of failure. And then we talk about this one lots. It's a guilt complex, right? Like, specifically on a farm, you feel guilty if you're not there every day with the guys and the girls that are working physically. So if you're not in the seeder, or you're not with the sprayers, or you're not with the combines, or you're not with the trucks, and yet as you grow, you just can't be there all the time. And you got to realize you got to do what you're good at. And the reason you're probably not there is they're probably better at it than you are. Right. And I don't actually believe that it's ego that gets in the way of most leaders getting out of the way. It's guilt and fear of failure. They believe that their team members are better than them at a lot of stuff, but they either feel so incredibly guilty by not being there. And to be honest, as you get bigger, if you build it right, you might actually work less. Like I mean, we track my hours. I do work less. And so you feel guilty that you're not working as much as you used to, or it's that just what if, like you're almost black swanning, what if could happen, then I'd fail. And it's not just that you'd fail in the eyes of your own goals for yourself. My big one is, what if I couldn't make payroll? Like I'd be sick to my stomach. The group of people that have decided to be part of this team, there would be no failure worse that I couldn't make payroll. And I mean, we're a long ways from that, but it still finds a way to kind of creep its way into my head beside guilt. And I think, but I like I said, once again, they don't cause me stress. They just cause me to get up in the morning and go tackle it.
Well, I laughed because I think I mentioned the line last week in the farmer coach session was that Kristjan still keeps timesheets. And everybody said, no, he doesn't. I said, yeah. I said, when I started, I needed numbers to track. And that was one of the numbers I wanted. And so, yes, he does. For those listening, he does have timesheets. Now, once busy season's done, I'm not saying he keeps up to them, but he does do them for busy season just for my numbers. The other two things, I mean, I didn't understand quite what you meant about the payroll side of it until honestly when I came over. And then once you realize the responsibility for other people, right? That was big to me because honestly at the firm, it was never there. I mean, I wasn't signing their checks. That wasn't it. And even here, even though, I mean, I've got the group and I've got you and I got Jeff and we have the different enterprises, for me, it's the responsibility of having other people that rely on you to actually come up with something to continue to make money. So that was one I didn't expect that's come across. And then honestly, for me, it was the crippling sense. I think for me, it was obscurity. So when I made the choice to come across, it wasn't for money. It wasn't for excitement. It was literally, did I want to be one of 800 partners in a firm? Or did I want to be one of 3 leaders on something that's never been done before? So that to me was the big change. Was I could be one of something big, or I could be one of something very, very small for me, but big in size, right? So that was the big one. Third one, high agency living. So doing what you want, regardless of what others think.
This one could go on a tangent, but yeah. So I think as entrepreneurs, you have to get to the fact real quick. And I've said this publicly that 30% of people aren't going to like you, might even be vocal about it. 30% are going to live their life, just going about life because they're busy, and 30% will be pretty big supporters. And I don't care if that means you're an entrepreneur. To be honest, if you're a youth sports coach, if you're doing a consulting firm like you are, it's just kind of the way it is. So make sure the people that are on your team are in the supporter crowd. They're not being negative behind your back, right? I think that's critical. The people that are on your actual team, cancer spreads, so don't have it here. They have to, at a minimum, be kind of just go along with it and they're okay, or they got to be supporters. Make sure that your advisors and mentors are supporters, and make sure you can sleep at night knowing that people don't like you. But at the same time, and I hate to give too much credit to someone out of Hollywood, but I think it was, I can't even remember the kid's name, Tom Holland, the Spider-Man kid. I watched an interview one time and he said, if you have a problem with me, text me. And if you don't have my number to text me, you probably don't know me good enough to have a problem with me. And I thought it was a pretty simple quote, in that if you got a problem with me, why are you telling everybody else? You might as well tell me, and we can walk through it and figure out. And maybe we do just have a difference of opinion, but maybe we just don't have the full story. And if you don't know me good enough to call me or text me, I'd argue that you maybe don't probably have a problem with me. You have a problem with something we're doing, or that it's not the way you do it, and everything else. And so once again, though, I think this one goes right back to our positive mindset is we just love being around people that that are focused on success, focused on positivity, focused on building up, right? And you and I both have a definition. Like, success is not just money, right? Like, your blog's about autism services and how you want a bigger future for that area of society, and the amount of money we try to donate and invest in youth sports, because we're both just huge believers in what youth sports can do for children, specifically in a society right now that wants to pretend that participation awards count in our education system at times, right? That you can still have a winner and loser in a hockey tournament or a ball tournament, and you're not going to get equal at playing time all the time. And there's just so much you can learn there. Like, success is what brings you joy in life. And I won't even say happy, because if your goal is to be happy every day, you're just lying, because life is not easy. Like, don't get up in the morning thinking every day is going to be easy or you're bored, right? It's what brings you joy. And you know, joy for me personally is I love to see our team members be successful and have better days every day. And joy for me is coaching youth sports, not just for my own kids, but just watching other kids develop and start to believe in themselves and work together. And I mean, and kids are too naive to understand all the crap that's going on in the world, right? Like, they don't know that currently the US president can't hardly remember his own name. That doesn't bother a 10-year-old. Yeah. They just know that they got to come to the baseball diamond and they hit 500 today and they hit 0 at the start of the season, and it brought them joy. And I think that's pretty important.
Well, and if only we could go back and spend one day like that, right? Like, that's the thing is today's world, there's so many things you could find negative, as we've said, and not be able to pull the joy out of, but you're correct in that. I mean, 10 years ago when I used to consult, it was financial. That's all it was. And then when I started here 5 years ago, it turned into HR and transition and, I mean, everything else that was coming around. And the negative part is that now I need to tell certain clients that come to us for, you know, that growth map and how to do it, that once they reach a certain size, you actually have to be ready that a third of the community or a third of those around you are not going to be happy with you and are probably going to say stuff that it's going to bother you. Yeah. And you need a stronger mindset to just let that roll off your back, because it's coming. I mean, I've proven it a million different times from a million different farms anywhere in Western Canada. There's no spot that's better than any other. Once a certain level of success is reached, there's always haters.
And I think the other thing too is you got to realize how you have to support your family and team, right? So I think in most cases, the farm leader has pretty thick skin. That's the reason you're the leader. What you might not be ready for is when people in town are real comfortable to go say something to your wife or your mom or the spouses of the people that work for you or the people that work for you, because none of those people signed up to have big shoulders. They're not the CEO of your farm. You are. You signed up to have big shoulders, and you're going to have to take some heat, just like you have to take a bad crop if it comes in bad markets. I found the hardest part when, and in most cases, the negative people they don't have enough guts to come talk to me directly. It ends up coming through my wife or team members, her dad. And that part, you know, it takes a while to help coach them to just don't worry about it. Tell them to phone me, right? Like, but you get a little frustrated if it comes through there. Now, don't get me wrong. We're dwelling on that 30%. It's also really awesome when the 30% of supporters go to your team members or your wife or we got an email just last week on the podcast. I don't know, I won't share it, but like just saying how awesome, you know, Riley's story was. And it really hit home, and pride, et cetera. And we also get a lot of that too, right? We have a lot of locals when the bus takes, you know, kids. The bus was out lots the last couple of weeks going to ski trips or going to field trips, and lots of special notes from parents and kids saying we wouldn't have got to do this if. And so, you know, I think you just spend a whole bunch of time focusing on the positive stuff, and you just review the negative stuff, because every now and then there's a diamond in the rough there where someone has a logical point, and you take that logical point, you know, forward and you improve. And the other ones you just write off because they just don't have much joy in their life, and they're trying to make that the same for everybody else.
In life, we choose our regrets. So regret is an unavoidable part of our existence.
Yeah, I mean, that one can cut pretty deep for an entrepreneur, right? So, I mean, as you know, I've always had a belief that part of the reason we got bigger was so that no one person was all-time important, because I couldn't live with the regret of missing my kids growing up. I couldn't live with the regret of not making baseball games and hockey games and, choirs and stuff like that. I just couldn't. It didn't matter what we were worth. I couldn't do it. And so I had to have this belief that being bigger, and at first I wouldn't say that we had a lot of logic between the process. I mean, you've known me for a long time. It was as simple as, if there's one person working and that person gets sick, you're screwed. If there's two, one person gets sick, the other person's job just doubled. If there's 10, it's only a 10%. If there's 30, it's only 3.5% or 3.2%. And so it was simply that math, right? And then that has grown in processes and how we can be more efficient, and our belief that if you have great people, you actually don't even need quite as many people, because great people just do more. But that choosing regrets is pretty important. And I think, one, in business, but then two, I even look at a number of friends I have, like, you will get pulled in all directions at all times, whether that's for coaching, for nonprofit boards, to go out for drinks with friends. And so at each point in your life, what is most important, right? And I mean, you'll joke with me now that some days I just don't like people, but no, which is kind of true some days, but some days it's just, I really like my kids and my wife a lot better than most people. And so I might miss an opportunity to go out for drinks with someone that the world deems important. But I just don't deem them as important as a night watching my daughter play baseball with my wife and son there. But it took me a while to get there. When the kids were really little, I probably made some bad decisions. But I think now we really look at that for all our team members too, right? Is that we know you might be on the spray crew for 14 hours a day, 2 days of the week, but we know you're not going to be on it for 6. And we don't want them to have to make that regret decision too often.
Well, it's funny. I took this one back to, I heard a story on Warren Buffett, and he was asked one time what the biggest loss he ever had was. And he says, it wasn't an investment I made. It was a lost opportunity that I chose not to make. So, he literally went on to talk about the millions of dollars he's lost by not jumping on opportunities, which you can go back to the successes on the other side of fear, or whatever quote you want to pull out of that. But that's the regret I see from a lot of, if I hear, I'd have bought more land, or I would have done this different. And to me, that's what holds people back, is that if you focus on the past and the regrets, you never actually move forward or make changes going forward, right?
Well, and I think one of the big ones is, because in our world, everybody wants to be busy. The one regret everybody needs to look at is, if you say yes to everything to be so busy that you have to say no to a big opportunity, you're going to regret it, right? So make sure you're only saying yes to things that you want to be part of and you want to do. You're not just doing it to be busy.
Yeah. You're the output of your work, not the outcome. So if you can say I did everything I possibly could, that's a win regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. And I think this goes right back to our sports team analogy. There's some times that you play the greatest game of your life as a team and you lose because the other team was just better. So I think that the big thing here is, if you have a plan, whether that be in business or life, and no plan goes from point A to point B. So make sure when it takes a hard curve right, that you don't just blame yourself and fall into depression and not move forward. Take a quick look at it. Did I do everything I could? Yes. Was out of my control? Okay. What's the next step to move forward? Because the opportunity's in front of me, not behind me. Right? Where I think it's in life and in business, people spend way too much time analyzing, looking for everything that went wrong, when in fact, maybe you should just be analyzing for the lesson you could have learned. Right.
And see what I find is, when things happen, we always like to joke that farmers have short memories, but we'll never forget selling canola at too low of a price one year, because next year we won't be selling. So it's those decisions, right, that go forward, that it changes the way you should have made the decision, because you can't forget what you did before. So it's more the output than the outcome. So
yeah,
you'll like this one. So think like a professional athlete.
Yeah. So, I'm addicted to what we do and to sports. And Usain Bolt would be the biggest one to use, right? He trained for 4 years at a time to run for 9 point some seconds. He ran other races, but he was only doing one thing. And it goes back to that, making sure you're prepared. The way you practice is the way you play. But that's not just sports. That's farming, right? don't waste June and July and the first part of August so that when it's ready to harvest, you aren't ready. You haven't practiced. Stuff's not pointed at the road. Same thing with the winter, right? Like you can't get to our 2 seasons. They're too short, right? 20 days of seeding and 40 days of harvest is too short to not be ready. And that, I think, just goes back to the professional athlete. Is there's certain peaks in every person's life and season, whether that be in a business, that are the most important. But all the other days are actually every bit as important, because those important days can't happen if you're not ready for them. And so you have to just believe it's building blocks for, the outcome that you want in the end. And all athletes are like that, but the Bolt example is probably the best one.
Yeah. And I had a metaphor said the other day, and I can't remember who said it, but they were talking about, when we're born, we count up, right? So you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, all the way to, let's say, 100. And how different the decisions we'd make are if we actually counted backwards. So, I mean, they were talking about health and fitness. So, I mean, every time you had a burger, you lost 2 hours off your life, or you had that little clock that actually was counting down. How would that change the way, you ate, or you didn't smoke, or you didn't drink, or whatever it might be? But then, I started thinking about agriculture of, let's say you only got 40 crops and you were counting down instead of up. Would that change the way you dealt a certain crop? So we all know if it's dry, some guys will pull back, they won't go for it, and that's fine. But if you were actually counting down and you saw that this was your 24th crop and you only had 23 left after it, would that actually change your decision-making power? So much like you said, the athlete side of every day counts. This one is every year counts, and everything you do counts in that year. So that's what I tied back on the metaphor side.
Well, I think you go back, the biggest thing is on relationships, right? People might not deem it important until that person can give you something serious or make a crazy deal. But as you go through life, the relationships you build will all become important, and the bridges you burn will probably cost you. Because as you get older, people tend to, move up in their company, or move up in their not-for-profit, or move up through their sports thing. And if you've burnt them, they will remember that. And if you've done good by them and they owe you a favor, they'll remember that too. And so every day all leads to that.
Outwork your self-doubt.
Yeah, I think all entrepreneurs will understand this one, right? Is that, so I mean, to the outside world, you go back to the early points that basically says entrepreneurs have an ego big enough, they believe in themselves, and they have a fear of failure, but they just know they can do it. But then if you go back to the entrepreneur themselves, take out everybody else's opinion of them, they just get up every morning because they fear failing more than they chase success. And so, and I think that's why you see doesn't matter if the entrepreneur's worth 10,000 or 100,000, or Buffett's worth billions and he still goes to work every day as a 90-year-old, is he's not focused on being a whole bunch richer. He's focused on still learning and being better every day, because deep down he actually doubts how good he is. It's also possible for the man to go bankrupt. He's worth that much money, right? But I find that most entrepreneurs I talk to aren't chasing a net worth goal or a profit goal. They're chasing a dream. And the problem when you're chasing a dream is it's a dream. You're actually never going to catch it. And every time you do get close to it, you're going to dream bigger, because in points 1, 2, and 3, you think it's possible. And then you get up every morning because you're worried you might not get there. Now, obviously, I think that's also why we probably see some mental health in entrepreneurs, because they also are really bad at celebrating success, because their team might think it was successful, but they're like, no, I got to get up tomorrow and chase the next one. Yeah, that'd be my thoughts.
Okay, I got a couple questions I want to get to, so I'm just going to run through the last 3. The last 3 were the good shit sticks. So more or less, the best way to remember the things you learn is to focus on the one thing you cannot stop thinking about.
Yeah.
Trauma happens for us, not to us. And the last one is you've already achieved goals that you said would make you happy. So, the only thing I want to say on that one is I remember seeing your first strategic coach of what you thought the farm would be, and it was 4,500 acres. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing. And we try to take time to celebrate, obviously, but I also am not oblivious that I've achieved a lot of goals that I set. and never even stopped once to look back and see that we'd done it, right?
No, and I think that's where, I forget where I saw that one quote, right? Like the overriding thing is, as people, I mean, we want to leave better kids for the world, and we want to leave a better world for our kids. And we got to remember that that's probably what gets us up every morning, more than a financial goal or an operations goal or a savings goal. So just make real damn sure that you still have time to do those two things on top of working.
So we had two questions come through over the last few weeks. The first one was a little bit more on the shift from cash is king to working capital is king. So why the focus on working capital when historically, I mean, farms, there's still a significant amount of farms that focus on cash.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the original focus on cash, specifically on farms, because it's cash based for taxes, right? And I mean, if you go in the venture cap world, cash creates your runway. My cost per month is this. It's going to be this per month for the next 12 months. So what do I have for runway? In the world of agriculture, I think the big shift was probably about a decade ago when now we're pre-selling grain up to a year before we plant it, and it might take a year or 18 months after to get to totally sold. And on top of that, we're pre-booking and likely even paying for inputs probably up to 18 months, but 9 months for sure before we're going to see the money from it when we harvest it. And that decision always moves around a bit. So your prepaids and your inventory tend to be extremely valuable. And if you are really worried about seeing your operating line, get above zero, you're probably going to miss opportunities to make more money on your inventory or save more money on your inputs, your prepaids. And so that's why we're really big at focusing on those two items. The value of our inventory and the cost of our prepaids are probably more important to us than our technical cash position.
Well, and I think for us, margin, right? It's what percentage of margin can we make by utilizing that 2-year period when we pre-buy to when we sell? Is that enough to cover the present value of cash? Because that's what most guys will say, well, I don't buy till I put it in the ground and I sell it right off the combine. My bank account never hits an operating line. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, except for the point that the neighbor might be sitting with a 5 million or 10 million or whatever the number is operating line, but his margins are 20% better because he's selling into the highs and he's buying at the lows. So, I mean, that was the big one. And what I've said to most guys is that's going to actually extend. Like, it's going to get further out. I mean, the US, they market further out than we do. I got guys that are looking at buying fertilizer sheds in order to pre-buy when they get the ultimate low price, and not pre-buy for 1 year, but pre-buy for multiple years because of what we saw 2 years ago when fertilizer doubled and we were at the mercy, right? So, yeah. So it's those discussions that I'm having, and without working capital and only focusing on cash, you can't have those discussions because cash is an immediate present value item where working capital is over past and future of what your actual operations are.
Well, I mean, and as good as me, I've always said, like, long cash positions tend to make lazy managers. And the reason is they can defer decisions because they have the cash to defer it. And it just might be they're scared of being wrong, but they probably had the right decision in their head, right? So, we purposely kind of strip cash to make sure that we stay sharp. It gives you more stress than it gives me. But, at the same time, it's internal rate of return. And if you can borrow money for 5 points and your IRR is 20, you just got to manage working capital position and everything's good. Now, I'm not saying go out and lever to the end because then you can get yourself in trouble, but you also can lever pretty good rates of return by using some debt.
Yeah. Okay. The other question, and this one actually came out of Georgia in the US, which that's the reason I brought it up because I was quite excited. We got a few fans down south, but 20,000 acre operation, and he wanted to hear more about some of the machine analyzing data and the equipment purchases. So we obviously done a few blogs, plus we talked about it a little bit out of seeding. So more or less a little more comments on how we're actually analyzing the data and how it's changing some of the way we purchase equipment.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a perfect world, you'd have a calculator that's based on soil zone and crop mix. So obviously Georgia is going to be a little bit different from here, but if you use Canada, the two typical ones in Western Canada, black soil zone, which is more of a canola, wheat, barley, oats, peas crop mix, and brown soil zone, which is more of a lentils, durum, chickpea type crop mix. So you kind of separate those, and then you go into like your normal metrics. So on tractors and sprayers, we're just using dollars per engine hour. We compare it to the old cost to the current trade-in value, just so we kind of know what we did on a depreciated value. But the real one is, what did it cost from this new one to the next new one? And what did that cost us per engine hour? Drills, planters, we do on dollars per acre, and combines we do on dollars per rotor hour. And we just find, we have hundreds of deals in there now, right? Between us and our clients. And I'll use 4-wheel drives for an example. I mean, there's variances of $150+ per engine hour. And so if a typical 4-wheel drive runs 400 hours a year, I mean, that's $40,000. And depending on the size of your farm, that can really add up per acre, year after year after year. So part of it is having, not being too independent that you won't share any data with anybody to have that conversation, and just blindly trusting your salesman. But I mean, even us, right? We didn't done much for equipment deals for 24 to 30 months, because the deals we got offered were nowhere near in the realm per engine hour that we were okay with. And now all of a sudden we're starting to do a few deals again, because the deals are real comparable to what they were 3 years ago. So it also kind of lets us know what's going on in the market from a cyclical standpoint.
And see, for me, the big ones are on the efficiency side. So, I mean, we went over our seeding data this year, and we've had some negatives online on it of why would you spend so much time doing that? I mean, we're having better metrics than you already, and we don't even track it and all those things. And that's great, because the fact you can tell me that number means I'm already winning, because you're already calculating it. But the biggest thing we're seeing is getting down into some of the deeper conversations. So, I mean, we had 36 and 32 inch tracks on the quad tracks. I now can tell you, based on speed, fuel efficiency, which we're switching to. Yep. From the data. The data has led a decision that now we're buying X track size because it is better for the units. The other one was we saw efficiencies decline on one of the seating units. Well, it's the one that we ended up essentially welding every second day the year before. Well, now I actually know the efficiency that it cost us. So when the farmer walks in and says, I need to trade my drill because the repair bills are too high and the opportunity cost and I'm down too long, I actually have the number, the cost per hour that it's actually costing us. So I know the opportunity cost. So it's not just I'm throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. I could actually tell you what that drill cost us by having it in the field last year versus the new one, which then I can compare to the price. So for me, data is huge, because it allows me to have those capital discussions on. Everybody seems to say, and I'm going to have this conversation later on with a few other guests, but I need a new shop and I want a mechanic because it's going to save us money on repairs. Well, I promise you it's not, because your own mechanic's going to literally go over those things with a fine-tooth comb, and you're going to spend more. And I know that because I have data on a whole bunch of farms that tells me that. So when we have those discussions of the analyzing and whether it's equipment deals, whether it's efficiencies, the reason we're pulling it and doing all this work is because it's actually giving us that cheat card that we've always talked about of knowing what the decision is before we make it. So when you go out and say, we need a new drill because this one's costing us X amount of hours per year, well, yeah, I can quantify that. Like that. Well, that's an easy decision.
Don't you think it's the base of every ultimate succession plan? How many times have we heard, my dad won't hand over the reins and his answer is, we've just always done it this way. Or, I've never calibrated my yield monitor. I don't care about the data. So the reason most succession plans fail is either one, there's not enough money to split for two people to live, or two, very few of the decisions have actually been made logically through data. They've just been made on gut feel and history, right? So I've always said it's my goal that if my kids don't want to farm, this place runs. Well, if we've got a spreadsheet of 20 years of me managing it, and here's when we did the deals at dollars per hour, and here's when we didn't do the deals, I don't need to be here. They can make that decision without me. And so awesome if somebody on Twitter wants to say, I'm better than you, good for you. I could argue and we can get into the nuts and bolts. Are we putting on the same amount of fertilizer? Did you float? How fast are you seeding? But I don't need to, because I actually think the world's a better place that you actually even thought about your number. And that's great. And I hope you told your kid about the number. And I hope you told your team about the number so that everybody learned something from the number. But we like calculated risk and we value data to make decisions. And we believe everybody should. Now, how much time you put into that is your own concern. But I mean, it's been said a lot. I mean, I want to turn our farm into blackjack farming, where we have the odds on every decision. And the reason I want to do that is I do not want to be the most important person around here to make the decisions. I want everybody else to make the decisions. And if they have the odds and they know that anything over 75%, Kristjan says go, then it doesn't turn into a monster. I don't have to be here all the time. The team can have more responsibility, which is what they want. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. And if you don't have data to help set the guideposts, all you're doing is trying to make yourself feel important to get phoned at, every 10 minutes to make all the decisions. And I mean, I used to think it was crazy that Zuckerberg and them wore the same color t-shirt every day because you only want to make so many decisions in a day. And now I'm pretty close to the guy that just runs black t-shirts and a blue hat every day. Right? Like, there's some truth to it.
Yeah. Okay. We've taken up enough time today. So I want to just add, because I didn't say it at the beginning, like, share, subscribe, comment, and thank you for following and keep giving us the likes and the shares. Because honestly, the further we expand, the stronger this becomes and the better guests we get and everything else. So that's all I got. And that's the truth about ag.